All right, well, welcome to the K-Hive. Welcome back, Screamers, to another episode where if bullshit were music, we'd be a big brass band. Today, we're excited to continue our look at the films of Greg Araki with the Doom Generation, Heidi Fleiss's star-turning role. Just kidding. Remember when Heidi Fleiss was a thing?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Like very much in the zeitgeist.
I remember it. Yeah, I remember the... Like, it's weird now that, you know, looking back on it with some lens of not sexual immorality or whatever, didn't actually turn off. Like, where we're not, you know, where all of the women who were perceived as sexual deviants at the time were ridiculed, and guys like Charlie Sheen were, you know,
propped up as like heroes because he's winning.
So
it's tiger's blood, man.
So her being able to provide a service for high profile men and then becoming kind of a pariah all of a sudden. The same thing that happened with Monica Lewinsky and things like that. They're kind of in that same era. But yeah, it's a weird.
Are you so what I hear you saying is there's a double standard?
Yeah, go figure.
I've never noticed that.
It's crazy. Yeah, I don't know if you go back and look at some of the historical ways we treat women. It's different than the way we treat men. It's unbelievable. But like if you start to peel away the onion, you'll find different examples of how that's actually the case.
So this is a very good segue, I think, into the first film we're going to talk about today, which is MaXXXine. We're going to get to the Doom Generation, but we're going to talk about Ty West's latest entry into the X trilogy. Speaking of women who want things that we tell them maybe they're not supposed to.
A24 presents the follow-up to a film that possessed a nation. The Puritan 2.
Cut! The blood's wrong. Molly Bennett, meet MaXXXine Minx.
Pleased to meet you. Sorry.
We've all got blood on our hands now.
The past ain't finished with you, MaXXXine. Ain't nowhere to hide. There's show business. You never work in this town again.
MaXXXine, what are you hiding?
I've seen the devil stalking me. I can feel his power.
We've made it to the belly of the beast. You must eliminate all distractions, or the beast will spit you right back out.
Time to pay for your sins.
It's America's new scream queen.
MaXXXine fucking Minx.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a very pastiche movie, so I think we should start here,
Yeah,
right?
Let's just jump in.
In 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress MaXXXine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. Is it a sinister past? And what I mean is, basically, wasn't it like a self-defense thing?
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess, how do we portray the entire trilogy from Pearl to X to MaXXXine and the characters? Do we perceive that they're somehow connected to one another, that Pearl leads into MaXXXine and X, and then, of course, in MaXXXine and MaXXXine?
That's the fourth entry, MaXXXine and MaXXXine.
MaXXXine and MaXXXine. MaXXXine on MaXXXine. It's the...
Wait, whoa, that's... Is that the new film? Is it like the adult film within the film?
Right.
Is that what that is? That's weird.
Yeah, I don't necessarily... I mean, obviously, within the Texas Chainsaw Massacre genre of the first film, which is X, which is not necessarily the first in the timeline, but the first film, it's sinister in the sense that it's the 70s grotesque kind of porn industry that was seen as kind of sweaty and underground and exploitative and less than, for the most part. I guess it's I don't know. The more that I sat through this film, I was trying to convince myself that I wanted to like it.
That
I should be wanting to like this more. That I was like, oh yeah, this is good. This is okay. This is okay. And then I'm like, when I get out of it, I'm like, yeah, no, I kind of dug it. It's all right. It's good. No. And then the more I got away from the theater, I was just like, fuck, I really didn't like that movie.
And the more you talk to me about it, I think the less you liked it as well.
Well, I mean, there were moments. I think this is a really good first hour, and that it's really let down by its back half. And I think we're going to see that in a lot of the films we talk about in the next couple of episodes. That this feels like the budget betrayed Ty West in a way. I think this was only $1 million film. It wasn't like he had a ton of money, but he did have more money than he had on Pearl or X. And
Which is weird because I think Pearl is the most, out of the three, I think it's the best one.
It looks the best.
I think it looks the best. I think that it is the freshest and the kind of most innovative of the three.
Right. And I wish it had stuck. I wish that it had. I know that Pearl falls into, then she's the ghost in X, right? She's I wish that there was some more separation between X and MaXXXine, because I feel like having X as the first film and then kind of branching out to a prequel, which is not, because you could take those separately, right?
Yeah,
Pearl exists in a sense where, okay, now we're going to MaXXXine and it's kind of the same story, right? It's the same, that she wants to be a star. I feel like those two should have mirrored one another better. And I feel like that, and of course, this is just, this is a weird lament from a storyteller perspective, that you wanted it to be something else. But like when I'm watching this, I feel like I was let down by MaXXXine because it was so pedestrian at the end, right? I mean, I know that it's harkening back to 80s sleaze and Italian horror, right? I mean, this was what it was. It has all of those trappings. But it really doesn't do those well. And especially the Italian horror piece where, in a Gallo, you would just end the film, right? You'd know who the killer was, and then it would be all done, right? There'd be some sort of comeuppance. There'd be a stabbing. There'd be really bright red blood. And then you'd roll credits. But in this one, by the time you get to figure out who the killer is in MaXXXine, and it's kind of obvious from
the very beginning.
From the very beginning, right? It doesn't really do that very well, right? Whereas in a Gallo, you'd have no clue, right? It's simply some guy that showed up in the town
wearing black gloves,
right? Early on, walking his dog and getting upset by something, and then deciding to kill the entire Italian village. And then you're like, oh, it was that guy. It was clearly that guy the entire time. That's really clear motives to want to murder everyone. But in this one, you find out it's her father, and that's who's upset with her, and is, this kind of like pseudo cult leader, religious leader who's trying to build his own empire, and then utilize his daughter as the coming back, it's kind of the prodigal daughter to come back into the fold after her porn star career, and he's blackmailing her with her her being involved with the events in X. And then, like I said, it turns, like I was telling you, it turns into the end of Dragnet, really. I mean, it's, there's this big party that is, with goat heads and flowing robes and shit like that.
And swimming pools.
And the cops that exist. And so this is where I think it kind of like, it betrays its Gallo, not origins, but its influences. Thank you. Because the cops completely undercut the Gallo aspect of it, right? The cops are there as only a way to save MaXXXine. So this whole Bobby Carnival and Michelle Monaghan, they're following her, and basically because she's tangentially involved with all the murders that are going on in Hollywood at the time.
They're all her friends or acquaintances.
Right. And they are like, why don't you want to know more? And like, why are all your friends dying? And why aren't you more concerned? And so they're tagging her around they're following her around all around Hollywood, so that when she does get kidnapped and taken to this party where she's going to be sacrificed by her father, they're there at the last minute to shoot the bad guys, or to cause enough of a disturbance for her to get away. And it feels like Ty West should be a better filmmaker than that. I mean, it feels like that denouement and that is so cheap and unearned and like so typical of really then 80s sleaze at that point, where it just like why do that? You kind of there's I don't know how you end it necessarily, but I feel like those two having, being able to save MaXXXine at the end, and then you have this ridiculous chase sequence, and it's just I don't know, it all falls apart at the end, and I feel like that almost one thing that happens is during the production of this, he comes up and says, "I've got an idea for a fourth movie," and I think had he allowed MaXXXine to die at the end of this, to like having it letting her father kill her, and that becomes that speaks more to Gallo to me than it does than what actually happens here.
But this is not just a like Gallo reference. And I think this is the problem, at least for me, because I feel like this film is all over the place,
Sure.
just completely all over the place, and it wears its references so much on its sleeve that hurts the overall film, especially at the end, because you're like, which way do we go, right? I mean, the detectives, like you said, have that kind of 80s sleaze reference and there's all this other stuff coming in, that any like ideas about MaXXXine being driven, strong woman who wants this thing and will stop at no cost to get it, that gets completely undercut by all this like nonsense. I mean, really, right? Because he's just trying to juggle all of these different like references. Oh, here's Chinatown, here's Psycho, here's this, here's that, and I'm like, where's the fucking story? Like, what just happened to our characters?
Well, and all of the focus that's then taken away, like you said, it's taken away from MaXXXine, right? I mean, like and having her being eaten up by like the Hollywood machine, I think is a more powerful, profound. It gives that character a much more, it's a much more of a tragic arc, but it's much more of a true one than what happens here, right? Like
let her reach a certain, pinnacle and then crash.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's already look, we see her kind of quote unquote escape the porn world and get into real acting, and she's still hoovering up blow, right? I mean, we're gonna see a crash, right?
Yeah, of course.
Let's see it. Let's see her reach what she wants, and then, what's the Norma Desmond? Let us see like the Norma Desmond moment, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't.
I did. To be fair, I did fall in love with the aesthetics of the film at the beginning. I do think that the Kevin Bacon like showing up in the Chinatown suit and like him being in the middle of the street, I thought that was really clever. The Psycho stuff, I thought, okay, it's a little on the nose.
Hey,
and
that's where they filmed Psycho.
Like I thought the China look. I know, and this may be giving it way too much credit, but I thought the Chinatown stuff was was subtle enough, but then still. On like a pun intended on the nose.
Yeah. Do you think that's where like Trump's doctor got the idea to bandage his ear? Was watching. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. And, yeah. I mean, it's a pretty infamous story where Trump's mom who he thought was his sister is actually his mom. So, I mean, everyone knows that, right?
Yes,
Lady Trump.
Everyone knows.
Everyone knows that story. I think everyone is doing a fine job acting wise in this. I think everyone kind of recuses us, but I do think like I don't know, like I wish it had been weirder. That was the whole thing about this movie is just like it seems so straightforward. Like even the Giancarlo Esposito stuff is it's okay. There's a guy who's willing to go to bat for her, and kill for her, like out of the blue.
The more interesting story there is all of these people had a previous life before Hollywood,
right?
I mean, that's the more interesting thing, and we don't get. I mean, really, I know that might be like asking for too much backstory or whatever, right? But it would make sense to know a little bit more.
And I think also this movie is very much let down in the tie that it has to X, and the fact that we continually go back to those events and because you don't do that in Pearl, right? And I understand Pearl is a movie that comes beforehand, and so it's a little bit easier to separate.
Then it'd be like a time travel movie.
Right. But like, you're not constantly reminded that Pearl is this, right? That Pearl is the ghost. You could take those two movies completely separate.
It's a self-contained.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like stardom in different eras, and stardom, how it chews people up or drives people insane or drives people to do really, really bad things or ignore bad things, I think is an interesting arc across time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in MaXXXine, it just doesn't do anything with that. MaXXXine's now this power broker who, and who's just a bad bitch who can kind of walk through this world. And yes, she's had to struggle. And yes, but the murders have nothing to do with her other than her father wanting stardom, right? And so it takes your focus off of your title character. And I don't know. I feel like it weirdly having it be her father also kind of undermines it as well. It could be it doesn't have to be related to her, right? It doesn't have to be.
And again, it detracts from the Night Stalker stuff. It uses that as just a pure kind of misdirection, which, like it could have just been going on in the background. I mean, like it doesn't, I don't know why but again, like you bring up the Night Stalker, you bring up this kind of like satanic moral panic, right? That was going on in this country of ours, right? At the time. But then all of this like nonsense, like referential, like I've seen movies, again, like gets in the way of how that interacts with MaXXXine's story.
Right. And like, why isn't MaXXXine the killer?
Right.
Like, why is she not the one who's the Night Stalker?
It's weird.
Or utilizing the Night Stalker to get rid of her
rivals, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's weird because on one hand, I really want to see this movie and kind of this whole trilogy as it's okay. It's okay for women to want things, right? Like other than just being a wife and a mother, right? It's okay to be a cat lady, a successful, right? Like, cat lady. I'm kidding, obviously. No, but like I want these films to lean into the feminism aspect. But then on the other hand, I want MaXXXine to be, like you said, the killer, right?
If Pearl can be a killer, then why can't MaXXXine?
Right, because I'm still weirdly rooting for Pearl and Pearl.
Of course, right? Yeah.
I mean, even knowing what she turns into with some like sex-crazy alligator keeping, like
right. But that's the power of Mia Goth, though. I mean,
this is true. You are not wrong. You're not wrong. So yeah, I mean, it's disappointing that it doesn't do that. And this is also another one of these films that is a film that is made in Hollywood, but is also like, hey, Hollywood sucks. Right? Like Hollywood will just fuck you up.
Yeah. I mean, and we've seen that story 100 different times. I mean, too. So it's not, and done. I think it's disappointing. Like, I think there was a lot of apologies for this film, but that being said, it's the highest grossing one. He probably will follow it up with the fourth. Although, I mean, at this point, like, I think you're done.
Go do something else, right?
I think you're done. Yeah, you can have Mia Goth as your muse. Go do something else.
But do something else let Mia Goth do something else.
What could you possibly, how could you possibly follow this story up anymore? Unless you take it like a MaXXXine in the future, like legit, like 2100s,
right,
2100 MaXXXine.
But no, don't do that. Does she have anything coming up?
I'm not sure.
Can't. But I mean, look, we've seen her in Infinity Pool. We know she can do different things. Let her do something different.
Right. She doesn't have to be that, that indie scream queen that
right.
Angela Bettis tried to be so long ago and never really quite pulled off. Whatever happened to Angela Bettis?
I don't know.
Yeah, she was good for a minute.
Well, look, which is longer than most of us are good for.
Right. Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if she's out there, come on the podcast. Because we
Let's
do
hang
know.
out. Let's talk.
Look, we know that Greg Araki's listening. We know that Criterion Channel is listening.
This is
we
true.
know that other quote unquote rival podcasts are listening. It's
That's right.
okay.
That's
so
right.
just let us know. It's fine. We're all in this together. This is a big rock that's spinning around in space. Let's not isolate ourselves.
Let's not avoid each other. Right. Let's indulge in real, true collaboration.
An open call. Greg,
and James Duvall,
Angela, James, and
Mia.
if Ali Sheedy's out there listening, well, the phone lines are open. There's an open seat. We'll get another microphone. We can do
always.
that.
Oh, that's not a problem.
We would love to have you on the cast. And Todd Jenkins can now ride his horse out here too.
I know, out to the Wilhelm Ranch.
Yes, the Wilhelm Ranch. Todd and Cisco will finally make it out. No one knows what we're talking about, but that's fine.
Look, do they ever? That's part of the charm of this podcast, Jason.
I feel like going back to MaXXXine, I feel like it's disappointing because it does crap out the trilogy, right? And it makes those other films less than when you add them all together. I'll still go back and review or revisit Pearl and X, but I wanted this to wrap. I wanted this to work so well. I think that's kind of why I was trying to convince myself that when I was sitting in the theater, I'm like, okay, I like this. No, it's fine. I like this. This is all. No, I didn't.
Yeah. I really wanted this to be.
And I did, and to be fair, I didn't hate it. I was just
fine.
I just was disappointed by it, right? I mean, there's some decent kills. I mean, like there's some interesting things in there. I think there's some people having fun, and I think the performances are good. I just feel overall that the story just wasn't there.
No,
and it just feels like kind of like a Back to the Future Part 3, really. I mean, like where you're like, hey, you tease at the end of Pearl, right? MaXXXine will be back in MaXXXine, right? Or Pearl will be back in MaXXXine, whatever it fucking said. But like,
I don't think they say any of that in Back to the Future 3.
Where we're going, we don't.
But who knows? They might have, and we missed it because I mean, it was going back to the future. So look, let me ask you a question. So for Film Club, we just watched Mulholland Drive, which is another film, I think, about women who want a kind of stardom, right? Or something, success, whatever, when they're not, quote unquote, supposed to. And it's also another film that kind of has this, like, I love Hollywood, but I also kind of hate it thing. Do you think, how do you think these two films are, like, in conversation?
I mean,
are they? You're just like, no. Like,
no, I think Mulholland Drive is the much better Gallo. I mean, even though there's not a lot of murder in it. Right. I mean, I think but I mean, like, yeah, comparing it to something like Mulholland Drive, I think you see that's a much better film that does exactly what this wants to do. But
it's a lot creepier too. It's a lot more dread inducing, I think.
Right. And I think that's kind of where, not to mimic David Lynch, because why would you want to do that? Like, I mean, because you would be unsuccessful.
Well, yeah, you can't, right?
But I mean, having something along those lines where if you took a straightforward aspect of how Mulholland Drive plays out, MaXXXine needs to be cocksure on the surface, but not underneath, right? I mean, and you don't take away her assuredness by having a murderer in the city. That's not her part of her character, right? There needs to be a concern that she can't make it, and that she has to do something to make it. Like having the Night Stalker tangentially attached to her. I go back and like look at something like this, like according to looking at this in the same lens of like Summer of Sam.
Oh yeah.
And that same kind of and again, it's that movie has way more characters, of course, but how everyone kind of handles themselves in the same environment that a mass murderer exists, or a serial killer exists. I feel like that kind of should have been the same thing here, where the Night Stalker piece should have just been a symbol of MaXXXine's, basically her self-doubt, right? It's this physical manifestation of her self-doubt. And no, it's just a real thing that exists, and it's her father who wants to build his own empire. I'm like, yeah, fucking whatever.
But then there's this other guy that they arrest, and it's,
I mean, at that point,
never really kind of.
At that point, you need Hanks and Aykroyd rapping, and then we can be done with the whole trilogy.
What if Mia Goth
and Barbie Carnival and Michelle Moynihan all rap together?
No, Mia Goth and Elizabeth Debicki And Mia Goth is the Tom Hanks part.
Yes. Look.
Also, why is Elizabeth Debicki in this film?
I don't know. I really don't. There's a lot of, I'm not sure why.
More Moses Sumney though.
Right.
I'm pro Moses Sumney.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about MaXXXine?
No, but I mean, I will say that like if a fourth one gets made, my expectations have been extremely tempered at this point, and my excitement for it is completely diminished. I don't think, aside from doing how well it did, I don't imagine anybody being overly excited to kind of continue this story with Ty and Mia.
No.
So unfortunately, it's not a give it 1.5 Wilhelms, I guess. 1.5 Wilhelms and a scream.
Okay, that's a new rating system that we did not workshop. So we'll see how that sticks or see how it lands. But let's move on to Greg Araki's The Doom Generation. Unless there's something else you want to fit in there.
No, okay. That's good.
I feel really weird tonight. Like something's gonna happen.
Me too.
What's your name anyway?
Xavier.
Is it cool if I just call you X?
There's something evil about him.
Copy 666.
Wake up, girlie.
What are you gonna do? Shoot us? Scram! Can I ask you to do us any big favors, huh?
Well, pardon me for rescuing your ingrained ass.
The suspects appear to be heading north.
I hope we die simultaneously. Like a nuclear bomb blast or something.
You're so romantic.
You're giving me an erection.
666.
Have either of you ever had sex with an animal?
Just you.
Should be considered armed and dangerous.
Here's me, Jordan.
Have you ever done that? Like, had sex with two people at the same time? Mm-hmm. No. Don't.
I love you, darling. You said you love me?
You know that I really only love you.
I love you! I love you can mean a lot of things.
Jordan White and Amy Blue, two troubled teens, pick up an adolescent drifter, Xavier Red. Together, the threesome embark on a sex and violence-filled journey through an America of psychos and quickie marts. All right, where do you want to start with this?
I don't even fucking know. I don't know. Like, I was thinking about these, the next two films, and I'm just like, yeah, how do we even start to pick these apart? Because you can't, plot-wise, it's not even worth bothering, right?
No.
Symbolically, I'm not even really sure if it's worth picking apart. Because I think what these films... One, here's a question I have for you.
Yeah,
So I was driving. I was like, how do you think new audiences will appreciate these films, seeing them in a lens 30 years after they were released?
So I think this fits in good with some issues I've had, like going back and sort of revisiting this film for the first time in a long time, but then also reading reviews at the time of this film. I think that audiences now, we're talking about like younger generations finding this, right? So it might be weird because, as we know, the younger generations don't have sex.
Right.
So,
right.
which even Araki said. Did you? I mean, you saw that, right? Yeah. But I think these movies, and the Doom Generation especially, is so weird that I think coming to it new, not knowing anything or not knowing what, or even having heard anything about it, I think they're going to be receptive to it. I think that's one reason why Strand Releasing did the new restoration, why Criterion's putting out the new box set, why Nowhere was out at theaters last year. Right? So I think there is a better reception for it now because the critics at the time didn't really like it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a mix. They're both mixed bags. So as far as Nowhere and Doom Generation was, as far as audience reception. And critics, like you said.
Rewatching both of these now, I had so much fun.
But I think, like, I find it weird that they weren't more championed at the time.
Well, see, I do too. I don't get that. I do not understand. I don't understand this. So, like, Ebert abhorred it.
Right.
And he abhorred the attitude of it.
But that's... Ebert was like that in a lot of senses too.
I know, a very kind of like Catholic taste, right? And I get that, but also the way that other critics looked at this, it was like just a complete refusal to see what Araki was trying to do, or to acknowledge like maybe his worldview. Because this is not. I read one review. Actually, it was it of the Doom Generation, or was it? It was. And I cannot remember the reviewer's name or the critic's name. But he reviewed the Doom Generation alongside Kicking and Screaming.
The Baumbach film?
Yeah.
Okay.
And was like, I watched both of these twice, and I like the Baumbach film much better now. And I'm just like, really? Like,
well, I mean, they're completely different. Films,
this is my point. Like, how do you compare those two, right? And say, I like this, don't like this. I mean, I get that, but don't put them together in conversation because, again, completely different sort of approaches and sensibilities and points of views.
As much as I abhor like the idea that you have to watch a decade and a half of cinema and I shouldn't use the word cinema, but like, but also consume all the other IP around comic book movies to appreciate all of the Easter eggs and I do feel like some knowledge of a filmmaker is necessary before you start truly. And again, that's not 100% fair. I think you can take individual pieces of art and evaluate them in among for their own sake, right? Yeah. But I do think that the transition that Araki has made and the story that he's been telling up until this point has been fairly consistent. And I think if you look at something like Kicking and Screaming and you apply it back to Three Bewildered People or Long Weekend of Despair, I think you'll find much more alignment in the story and how the characters behave. And I love Kicking and Screaming. It's one of my favorite movies. But this, Araki is getting angrier, right? I mean, and look, there's still some of that. They're different to points in time too. The Doom Generation is specifically speaking to a younger audience, and it's also speaking to a much lower class audience.
It's speaking to outsiders,
right?
I mean, it really
is. Whereas in Kicking and Screaming is this middle class and upper crust malaise that exists in the Generation X of like we've been given everything and we have no idea what to do with it. We're going to be a philosophy major for years and years and also work as a bartender. I mean, right. And there's no harm that's going to come to us. We're never going to worry about a thing. Our dad's still going to have a leased apartment in New York City for us to go to, and he's got connections and at the Post and the Times that where I could write and submit some of my stories and Grover's going to go off and skip a few interviews, but ultimately end up at a computer programming company and be fine. Even Skippy, your dumbass white friend who wants to read all the great short novels in the world, is going to be fine at the end of the day, right? He's still that dumbass, and that's the malaise of Kicking and Screaming. Kicking and Screaming is these kids will probably never accomplish anything great, but their lives will be fine. And I think they're struggling with this idea of like we should be better than what we are.
Yeah.
The Doom Generation is struggling with we're fucking furious at where we've been placed and how we've been treated. And you see the three characters are each different archetypes of the outsiders that exist.
Right.
One is an innocent who just wants to get along, who just wants to
love his girlfriend.
Love his girlfriend.
Be in love.
Right. Yeah. He wants to have a life that is shown to him in an Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver type existence. The girl is trying to navigate sexuality and being torn between the Leave It to Beaver and this violent anarchist lifestyle that also comes into play. And then you have the anarchist who just wants to fuck shit up and like doesn't want to play by the rules because the rules don't apply to him and they don't benefit him in any sense. This idea I think that's an interesting question in general, just because like how will millennials and Gen Z look at Gen X angst and understand where it was coming from. This idea of a generation that has, you know, I know this has all been said before, so this is not like, but you know, there are no great wars, and there's no, you're going to be the first generation that does, you know, more, you know, does less than what your parents did in regards to
worse off than your parents.
Worse off than your parents. And you have no highs and no lows. And the highs and lows that you have are all manufactured. They're all bullshit, extreme sports examples that have showed up to you on TV, or they're drug induced. But even the drug induced ones, where the baby boomers had, you know, free love and all the drugs, and it's all been tainted and poisoned and diseased to the point where you can't even really enjoy that. So it's all this kind of nihilism that comes out of that, you know, you have nothing to rage against, and so you just rage.
So you just rage, right? And you just go where you can.
Right.
And you just, I mean, look, this idea, like from Ebert, that and others, that Iraqi is like poking at the unhip America. I mean, I think that's bullshit.
I don't think they have any concern whatsoever for unhip America.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, I think Iraqi is saying this is how difficult it is to be X in this fucking country, right? This is what you have done. I mean, the ending of this film is so fucking brutal, but of course it's just like, you know, standing on the American flag, or Rose McGowan is raped on the American flag.
Right.
These neo-Nazis killed James Duvall, right? All in the name of you should be normal, right? And so, yeah, it just to not see that, to see it as disaffected, and to call, I don't think Iraqi is aloof at all. I don't think he's I know, but this is what I mean. Like, I mean, I'm so confused by these critics who's like, well, he's just trying to hide behind his style. And I'm like, the style is part of this. The style is part of the message here, right?
I think as much as we talk about like how Bakshi is a mirror of society and like the things that he grew up with, I think this is exactly what Iraqi is doing. I think he's throwing all of these. If you take a look at the time frame that this film is made, like if you take a look at like where this like really kind of wanton and grotesque violence that exists everywhere on screen, in games, and again, I'm not like bad mouthing any of it, but that's just what you're presented with. This is like, and the idea that we were supposed to connect with that on some sort of intellectual level, that have something to mean to us other than just rather than having to just be a release. I think that's exactly what Iraqi is saying, is that, look, I don't have any sacred cows that I'm trying to tear down here. I'm just trying to figure out where these kids fit into a world that doesn't want them.
Doesn't want them at all.
And then keeps trying to market to them in certain ways that don't ever really speak to them. So this idea that, you know, because again, they're not affected by the violence that happens on screen until it actually kills them, right?
Right.
But they're not really that torn up about anything that happens, any of the murders that they commit or anything that they're involved in. You know, and I think this idea of like the three of them being, you know, in literal hell, you know, speaks to a lot of what Iraqi is saying here, which is, again, like we have nowhere to fucking go. There's no bright side to any of this. And you know, and of the time, again, when we keep going back to saying like, we're still in an AIDS epidemic. We're still ostracizing queer youth.
And punks and goths, right? Where, I mean, there is this Venn diagram, right? This overlap of those three.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of like, you know, queer teens are going to find acceptance in those other communities, right? But definitely not in mainstream. And then mainstream's going to tell those three communities, we don't really fucking want you.
Right. Or we'll market to you, but only to get your money, to sell you things, right? Yeah.
Right. And then tell you that you're doing everything wrong anyway.
Right. But then still try to make you feel bad about your moralistic code that you have.
Right.
Or that don't have according to our
and charge you
standards.
$6.66 for everything.
Right.
It's such a good like running joke throughout
it
the whole
is.
thing.
And I think the I think it's disappointing from an Ebert perspective. Of course, Ebert had a lot of blind spots in these types of films anyway. But if you pair this with something like Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers, like this is much more affecting. This is not. It's not embracing the wanton violence like Stone is.
Right.
It's not tapping into this Tarantino-esque era of just blatant disregard. It's trying to say something for these kids that are in this movie that are stuck in this. That it throw us a fucking lifeline.
Yeah.
Help us.
Yeah.
Like you don't have any, and this is what. Like you want to know how we're feeling. This is how we're fucking feeling. The fucking title of the movie is The Doom Generation. We've got nothing.
Right.
We started off in hell and we have no way to get out of it. We're just driving from point to point, you know, and the more that we do, the more fucked up shit gets.
I don't understand, because this is constantly compared to Natural Born Killers, and I don't really get it.
It's simple. It's
right?
simplistic.
I mean,
right?
it's an easy connection, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just because of the way that the violence is portrayed.
Yeah. And so Ebert compared it to that and California with a K, and was like, those are so much better, blah blah blah. But then he also, I mean, he praises films like Bonnie and Clyde and Badlands, which those to me feel a little more closely aligned with Doom Generation than the other two. But if you can see those as good, I don't know how you're missing this. Like, I don't know how you're just like, and I know that I come on this podcast and gripe about Ebert all the time. You know, Pauline Kael didn't write anything on this, right?
Right, shocker.
No. So I have to find someone to like yell at and argue with, right? And he's the one. But I don't know how you see that. I don't know how, you know, Ebert wanted Araki to make those kind of movies, but he's never going to make those kind of movies.
Right, because he's been telling the same story. Like no one's gotten this story yet.
Right.
So, and this is his first movie that kind of breaks out. Right. This is the one you're going to see at Blockbuster. This is the one you're going to see at the indie art house.
And he has
theater.
like an actual crew.
Right. Right. You know, and he has his muse now at this point. So I think
Heidi Fleiss.
Yes. I was watching this and I'm like, I don't know how to say his last name, but like Jonathan Sage.
It's a hard CH. So it's like
Skate.
Steak. Or yeah.
This is compelling podcasting, by the way.
This is content.
We spend 30 minutes
Shake.
trying to break.
I think it's Shake.
Sure, whatever. He was in that thing you do. It's fine. I'm surprised. Like
it is Shake. I just looked at the phonetic. It just gets better.
Right. I think he's great in this. Like, I think it's like he's a revelation because he's not really this good ever again.
Yeah,
like, he's fine in that thing. Is he in that thing you do? He's the lead singer that walks away from That Thing You Do. Okay. He's fine in that. I mean, he's fine in things, but like this, I feel like is like it's dangerous and scary and just like good. You know, you go back to like also like I keep going back to threesome in this area, but
right.
But this is a great perversion and a violent take on that as well. But
yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Aside, kind of cutting back to not going away from the Ebert and everyone misunderstanding this film, but like because we'll get back to that in a second. Are we to assume that at least in some form that Duvall is the personification of Araki in these films?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think he is a kind of a stand-in, right? I think he's a stand-in for maybe the way Araki sometimes wants to see the world or experience the world, or at one point did experience the world. I think that he is the closest thing to, Araki's POV. And also, like, that we'll see, as we'll see in Nowhere, like coming up, there's a kind of, well, I think also this idea of like maybe sexual exploration or sometimes confusion is also, I mean, coming directly from Araki as well. So yeah. But I think, did that not answer your question? Like, yes.
Okay. Yeah, simple yes would have been fine.
You know me well enough to know that's like never going to happen, right? But I think Duvall then also functions in this film, especially as kind of, like you said, that innocent lamb who has to be slaughtered at the end of this film, right? And continues to function in this kind of mode of curiosity,
right,
throughout like the rest of the film,
and concern, and like trying to figure out. He's the
empathetic one too,
right? Yeah, he definitely gives it an emotional center as well. He gives you, because if it's just Bonnie and Clyde with the two, and then you know, then it's easier to dismiss. Like going back to comparing this to Natural Born Killers, and the reason even I brought it up was just because stylistically it's somewhat similar, right? I think this is a really bizarre time in Stone's filmmaking career, because he would go from Natural Born Killers to U-Turn, which are both kind of bizarrely like weird perversions and kind of like Tarantino on acid kind of films. I actually like U-Turn. Natural Born Killers just has not held up for me. It's so garish and like it's so loud, and I don't think the satire works in Natural Born Killers. And so like where you're...
But do you think Stone is really capable of doing satire?
No, I don't. I think Stone is good at what he's good at, right? I mean, I think it's that...
Back into the left, no, back into the right.
Right.
Back.
Look, I mean, I think JFK is a pretty spectacular film.
No, I do too.
And I think even Platoon and Born on the 4th of July, and I think those are good films. What's the last one that he did? What was the final of his? It was with Tommy Lee Jones. I forget. I won't be able to pull the title, but I don't mind Stone as a filmmaker. But I do think that those two films are an interesting entry, and I think it's kind of a weird, I just feel like what Tarantino did was just, and of course, Natural Born Killers was written by Tarantino to a certain, I mean, like obviously they did stuff with the script after that fact, but I feel like Tarantino just shook up the Hollywood entity and showed that you could make an obscene amount of money on these low budget like hyper violent films. But if you go back to Natural Born Killers, like there's no social commentary really.
No, not really.
I mean, and if there is, it's so heavy handed with the Rodney Dangerfield pieces of it and the Robert Downey Jr. pieces of it, where it's, he's Geraldo and then it's this kind of pedophilic, again, Leave It to Beaver type sitcom-y thing that exists with the Rodney Dangerfield section in Natural Born Killers. But everything else, the Woody Harrelson monologuing, it feels all icky more than it does actually saying something true. Like that he's it almost like seems like it's undermining its own theories in this case, where like he's a product of his environment, but then he's just going off and murdering people wantonly. And like, so like, what are you actually trying to say in Natural Born Killers? California, I don't know why you compare those two films. Yeah. Like California is such a Bonnie and Clyde kind of like simple film. It's such a nothing burger of a movie.
Yeah, I think everybody's just looking for comparisons, and that's just where they go, right? I mean, kind of like near contemporary comparisons.
And I guess if you're looking for female, male, like killer movies, right, then okay. I mean,
and how would we ever talk about two guys and a girl and sexual fluidity and crimes and violence? That we just can't do that.
True.
So it's easier to just go look Bonnie and Clyde.
Well, and I think that's the problem with Iraqi that faces, and again, probably the problem that a lot of the filmmakers we talk about face, is that they're too fucking far ahead of their time to actually be compared to anything else. And again, we keep blowing smoke up these people's asses, but I mean,
somebody has to.
I don't think it's untrue to say that, I think Iraqi in this specific case, like everything other he's done up until this point has been, it's been ahead of its time, but it's also been kind of in the same playground as films that have come before, right? I mean, like it's in this, maybe not films that come before, but like
I would say that, excuse me, the first two, yes, but Totally Fucked Up, I think took a turn, right, where it was really doing stuff that nobody else was doing, but then they did later, like a year late, like right there on the cusp. So I think he was leading kind of that charge to other things, but we just forget about it.
True.
And so, yeah.
So I think the Doom generation and the images that you're seeing aren't too terribly off of what you would be seeing in other films at the same time. But I do think that what Araki is doing is taking those exact same images and making them mean something more, because he's, again, reflecting the emptiness of the things that that are being sold to us. So the emptiness of something like trying to find meaning in natural born killers, and having that as being some sort of like, seminal, eye-opening film that speaks to a generation. I think it's bullshit. I think that's part of what like Araki is saying here, is that all of these garish Mountain Dew images that are being sold to us don't mean anything to us. They're just as ugly as right. And so that's all part of what's being presented on the screen.
And I mean, that first Quickie Mart scene, I mean, it speaks directly to that point, right? And it speaks further to the point of alienation of these two, right? When the clerk, when cocksuck, right, yells at Amy for smoking a cigarette and threatens to shoot her. Right. I mean, if she doesn't put it out, if she doesn't pick up the cigarette butt. I mean, but again, like this idea of, okay, you think we're violent, but look at the violence kind of portrayed onto us, right? Look at the violence that's been, affected, right?
Right.
You forget about that.
And they're still presented with the they live, hidden subliminal message, but now they're not subliminal, right? They're just in your face,
right.
Consume and buy. And,
right.
Yeah. I really, like, I think as much as you can say this film is playful, I think the playfulness really works for it. I think having these characters, I think where he's amped up his game in Doom Generation with all of the ridiculous speak and the hyper realized language and dialogue. I think one that speaks to also the pop culture bullshit that's coming along in the other films that you're seeing. And then kind of just taking on that kind of Heathers-esque, just ramping it up to the next degree, right?
Right. I mean, and delivering these lines with a very specific style, too. I mean, so you think of Heathers and it's, fuck me with a chainsaw, right? And then you get Rose McGowan at one point just going, eat my fuck. But her delivery is so specific.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's I don't know. It is very different than the Heathers delivery. It is
right.
Very, almost like a Yorgos Lanthimos film where that type of delivery is so stylized and so specific to those films.
Yeah, and it speaks to Araki's talent to be able to find people that can pull that off. Because again, you talk about Skate and he can't. I mean, like he doesn't really ever pop like he does in this movie again. Duvall certainly does. And McGowan, I think, does as well. I think McGowan has an unfortunate career, of course, because of Weinstein and what happens to her. But but she really was an interesting talent. Not to say that she isn't still, but
right.
But
you see her in Scream,
right?
You see her in Charmed. I'm kidding. Can you imagine going from Shannon Doherty on a set to Rose McGowan on a set? I mean, just again, I'm not trying to speak ill of Rose McGowan, but you talk about. Anyway.
Yeah, I think she's great in this.
I do too.
I think she's much fun, and I think one of the things again that I wish that it's disappointing that someone like Ebert hasn't picked up on is the sexuality in this film is not muted. That's right. All owned. That the only one that really is concerned and is still it's not. He just trying to figure it out is Duvall's character. Mm-hmm. But I mean, McGowan doesn't really have any reservations and doesn't really make any apologies. And I think that's hugely important for films like now, right at this time.
And so speaking of that, it's also telling that McGowan's character, Amy, is constantly mistaken for someone else, for other men's girlfriends. Right. And her refusal to assimilate those roles, right? Those personas and those identities just reinforces that she won't be someone that other people want her to be.
Right.
So going back to this idea of powerful, driven women that we talked about earlier, right? She won't be the type of woman that men want her to be, right? She's figuring herself out through sex and misadventures, right? And for this, people want to kill her.
Well, and we brought up in the last episode whether or not, or maybe it was this last episode or 2 episodes ago, about whether Iraqi is a good writer of female roles. I think in this one is absolutely he is. And so this is the first, I think, fully realized, not with female voice, with a female voice, right?
Yeah.
That's not, reflecting what a male would say for a female in this case. Yeah. And I think she's wonderful in this.
Oh yeah. But I mean, again, like this film was 95, right? It speaks just as loudly today. I mean, especially the bit about McGowan here, or Amy's character.
Yeah, for sure. I just wonder. I wonder if there's this much anger and angst in Gen Z or whatever the fucking generation that exists at the moment. The ones that are excited about the Skibbity Toilet movie that's coming out.
No, I'm sorry. The what?
I don't want to go down a Skibbity Toilet rabbit hole, but I'll let you do that.
Okay, I will. I'll tell you that I will look for it, and then I just won't.
Michael Bay is putting out a toilet. Yes, I mean, like much like the other. Wow, that's a
yes.
apropos.
So that's his new. Yeah,
right. He's putting out a movie
Bad Boys 5,
based on a YouTube series, and which is. If you had, and this is not a dig, because of course, but like if you had younger children, you would have heard the term "skibbity toilet."
Oh, okay.
It is.
But I'm a cat lady with no kids.
Yes, and so you can't clearly run the country.
I don't fucking want to, right? And there's the difference between like Gen X and I want nothing to do with that.
Right. You clearly cannot be trusted to run the country.
But I think we will see shortly how much like rage. I don't know. Like. We'll see the rage and angst, I think, coming sooner than later. I don't know, or we'll find out.
Right.
I don't know. Did you happen to read any of the Amy and Jordan comic that this is loosely based off of?
No.
So, these characters are based off of the Amy and Jordan comic by Mark Beyer. And like, they are a dysfunctional couple who are victimized by unforeseen circumstances and in turn by each other, which is pretty accurate.
Right.
There is, I found some of them and like just kind of like, read through a few of them, but there's one where Amy's always driving the car. Mm-hmm. So like in the movie, but Jordan's like, Amy, I'm hungry. And she's like, hang on, we'll find a restaurant. Let's go eat. So they find a restaurant, they go eat and they're like, why do all the customers look weird? Everything looks off. And a waitress goes, well, this is a restaurant only for mentally ill people. And they're like, oh, cool, we fit in. Like, that's it, right? I mean, that's the strip. So,
nice.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to fit with this vibe. But yeah, interesting comic.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. What else do you want to say about this?
I
have a question. I have a question. Why is Nicky Cat and not just that guy?
What do you mean?
What I mean is like, so I see Nicky Cat pop up in movies and I'm like, small parts.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, that's Nicky Cat. But there are a bunch of other people who have like the same career as Nicky Cat. And I go, oh, it's that guy from that other movie. And I just wonder why like Nicky Cat is Nicky Cat.
I don't, maybe it's the look. I don't know. Who's the guy?
See what I mean?
Who's the guy who was on CSI Miami and was in Empire Records
and Dazed and Confused?
It's Rory and Dazed and Confused. But
I don't know.
No, he's not. His name is Rory Cochran. It's Rory Cochran.
There you go.
Yes,
there you go.
So.
But see, like I would never know his name. I would never know his name, and I bet they have like the same kind of
for sure
career. This is my point. That's my point, right? I would never go, oh, Rory Cochran, right? But I go, oh, Nicky Cat.
I think Nicky Cat's too intense. I think Nicky Cat was too intense for his like, and it doesn't help that like, I mean, like the only time that Nicky Cat's not intense is in
Boston Public.
Well, it's also his guest stint on Friends, but I was mostly speaking of Higher Learning. His stint in that where he's kind of more Rory Cochran-esque than he is Nicky Caddish. But yeah, he's just too intense. He looks too scary. Like in general, like he comes off as being,
Right.
it's like a Chris Penn kind of look. Not in the same vein, but like the same kind of.
You know
kind of
what?
like,
I never thought about Chris Penn as being like scary and intense, but he is. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh
Look,
man.
There's like, yeah, he's Chris Penn. Right? He's got kind of that kind of like doughy, but like that guy carries it well when he was alive. That guy carried himself with a weird level of confidence, and like he always. I don't know if you ever saw him on like. On talk shows, he talk about like Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme and talk about how they were pussies and how he could kick their ass, like that they're not real fighters and that he could take them easily. There wouldn't even be a question. There was something about Chris Penn that was just always
You're like, I believe you.
Oh,
yeah.
for sure, 100% for sure, I believe him. Because there's no reason that like that Van Damme or Seagal would like not take up the challenge if it weren't real, right? I mean, if I were like, if you wouldn't say that about Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee would have like would have given you a bad like, but absolutely, yeah. So I think that's the same thing. It's like there's just a weird level of intensity that like that Nicky can't get away from, and even like in his comedic roles, he still seems like he's one misstep away from
blowing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's a good answer. Good answer.
No, last thing's about the Doom generation. I mean, I think it's a really, I would say it's probably a challenging film to kind of just sit down and just to ingest. Going in blind to these things, I think going back, and I hadn't seen it in a really long time either. And I just found myself, the one thing I was going to say is like, don't go in trying to figure out the symbolism, like the symbolism of them being in hell and 666. They're tangential, right? They're not like it's not necessarily important. You're not going to uncover some greater meaning to the Doom generation, or like all the pieces aren't going to line up. So if you start mapping them out on a cork board, it's not going to fucking play out for you, right? It's not going to be, I've got some big revelation that
I mean, it's
Amy
not hidden
is,
though.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing much deeper than just that, right?
Right.
They're stuck in hell. Their character names don't mean anything. Like, they're not like...
Well, red, white, and blue. I mean, I think...
Sure.
I think
I'm not saying there's not symbolism.
No, I understand.
I'm just saying there's like some sort of greater meaning. Like, this is not really an allegory. This is just anger expressed on screen, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, saying that, I think this kind of leans into... I mean, Iraqi to me seems, at least in some way, a variation of like pop art.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're saying is, kind of like Warhol, right? It's all right there.
Right.
It's all right there.
Right.
And I think he's very much doing that same thing with the tinfoil bars.
Yes. Right.
And the colors, the use of colors, these like bright colors, and it's just like neon soaked and everything.
Yeah. And the sets that aren't really sets, they're all kind of,
right.
Yeah. That's the one thing that I really love about this era of Iraqi is that he's really, really expanded on his visuals. Like as much as you had it and Totally Fucked Up in The Living End, like they're just so, he's really, really like that part of his art has evolved. And like, so like they're so stark and so beautiful and like everything. I would love to have a whole huge set of like lobby cards of this film where he just images that he picked out.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, again, like, and I mean, I think, like I said on our Living End episode, right, you start to see it there, right, and then this is like really him coming into that fully.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Anything else on your mind?
That's it for today, I guess.
Okay. So
my mind is completely emptied out.
There's nothing resting on my mind any longer.
I've got nothing else to concern myself with.
Okay. So we'll be back next time with more stuff. And until then, thank you all for listening.
Keep screaming.
Everybody put up their hands. I get a half a mil for my beats. You get a couple grand. Never gonna see the day that I ain't got the upper hand. I'm respected from California, way down to Japan. I'm a real producer and you just a piano man. Songs on top of charts, I heard them.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,